welcome to a special edition of Adventures in Education. This is a tribute to a person who is so special that we are going to do two programs, part one and part two, a tribute to Agnes Baker Pilgrim, known fondly by everybody as Grandma Aggie. And I have two guests today that are in a great situation to tell us about some of the accomplishments. And so I'll tell you who my guests are. This is Tish McFadden.
Hi, John.
And Thomas Doty.
Hey, John.
And you guys have had the privilege, I would say, of actually knowing and spending time with Grandma Aggie. I have never met her, never been in the same room with her. I'm pretty sure if I had been in the room with her, I would have known about it. And the other thing is, in getting ready for this tribute, and even before when I've had both of you as guests on other situations, I feel like I know her, even though, or at least know some aspect of her, even though I've never met her. I'd like to start with your first experiences in getting to know Grandma Aggie. And Tish, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I first met Grandma Aggie about 35 years ago. I came to Southern Oregon in 1980 as a cultural anthropologist and archaeologist, and I was tasked with protecting the prehistoric sites of the Takelma people and the Takelma indigenous neighbors throughout Southern Oregon and Northern California. And even before I arrived from Utah, where I was doing archaeology prior to Oregon, I was hearing about Agnes Baker Pilgrim. I was hearing about the Takelma people and how there is still living members of the Takelma tribe, and especially this one, Agnes Baker Pilgrim, who was a spiritual elder. And so having been working in Utah, I was working with indigenous cultures that were no longer extant, no longer living. I couldn't speak with them, and I will never forget meeting Aggie early on when I came to Oregon, just in awe that here I was being able to speak with this wonderful Takelma elder, open-hearted from the get-go, meeting me, a young 25-year-old, new green behind the ears archaeologist in Southern Utah, or Southern Oregon. Anyway, we had a very lovely connection then, and and then Thomas, I met you early days in my archaeology career here. Thomas Doty also was well known, even back in those days, as being well educated and connected to the indigenous cultures here as a native storyteller. So it was a very nice link that has lasted all these years now, 35 years later.
Wow.
Very fortunate.
Yeah, indeed. And Thomas, you had an experience where you first met Grandma Aggie.
Yeah, this was about that same time in the early 80s. I had met her briefly, I thought, but it wasn't her. It was somebody else.
Oh, crazy.
But there was a symposium here at SOU in the early 80s on Native American culture. And there were a lot of speakers, a lot of folks. And at one point, I was telling stories at this symposium. And I looked to the back of the room, and there's this Native American woman in full regalia with color-coordinated basket cap holding an eagle feather. And I'm looking at her, and she looks really, really familiar. That's why I said I kind of met her already. But I couldn't quite put my finger on who she was. And I finished my storytelling. There was this big applause at the end of it. This woman stands up, and she looks at me directly, holds up her eagle feather, points it at me, and nods her head in approval of the stories. Oh. And I would find out very soon who she was, because she was the next speaker. Right? Mm-hmm. But the reason she looked kind of very familiar to me is I had a photo of her great aunt, Frances Johnson Glisquishon, sitting on my piano at home. And she was the last fluent speaker of Takelma. She died in the 1930s, and she was just a dead ringer for Aggie. Oh, and that's why she was looking familiar, and I felt like maybe I'd met her before somehow.
Oh.
And from all of this, I understand you became involved in something that she's very well known for, and that is restoring the sacred salmon ceremony.
Yeah.
We have a video clip of her talking about that. So let's watch about the sacred salmon ceremony. We'll be right back.
So when I was living in Crescent City, California, God called me to come back here in 1993 to restore the sacred salmon ceremony. And I finally did that. My husband at the time was a fisherman on the Klamath River, Grant Pilgrim, and he caught all our fish, and he made all our cooking sticks out of redwood, because redwood, when it's heated, doesn't have any pitch laced in the wood. And he'd make all our cooking sticks and catch our fish, and then we came over to on the Rogue River above Gold Hill and started this salmon ceremony. We started in 93. 1994, the state fish and game came and they said, "Grandma, we don't know what you've done, but there's more salmon in that river than we ever heard of." I said, "When you do this blessing, God helps and to bring the salmon back."
And Tish, I believe this is one of the video clips you include with this curriculum that you're
Yes.
developing right now.
Yes, it's called Upriver to Morning, A Journey to Wisdom, inspired by the teachings of Agnes Baker Pilgrim. And when I re-met Agnes in March of 2016, is where she was having her book signing there at Bloomsbury Books, we reconnected there, and I felt that there was so much richness that needs to be shared with our next generations, which is also Grandma Aggie's wish herself. She always wanted to have her teachings rippled out to children, and she was so great at speaking with children. And so I decided to write this story, a fable, Upriver to Morning, that's in her teachings and her wisdom. Takelma, ancient wisdom, is woven through the storyline. And yes, and so this space that you just saw, this film shoot, this is at the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy's Rogue River Preserve, a beautiful stretch of the Rogue River. And there are Takelma village sites all along this stretch of the river, actually. And Grandma Aggie was there, and the head of the Land Conservancy got to meet her. Kathy Dombey was very thrilled to do that. And it was a perfect place to have this conversation with Aggie. And we spoke about the salmon ceremony and so much more.
Sure sounds like the perfect place, because I know that water is a very important thing for Grandma Aggie. And there's another clip from the same location, and she talks about a reflection on one of those salmon ceremonies. So let's look at the clip of Aggie's salmon reflection now.
It's always amazing to me how the people were boosted up about that ceremony.
Oh, people got very excited about it. And remember that first year? Hundreds of people came.
I know, I was
There were
dumbfounded.
so many people.
How
And
the
we
word
told
spread.
stories and we sang songs and we baked salmon, and everybody was and the divers did their thing, and it was an amazing experience.
Later on, I forgot what year, but the bear dancers heard of it.
Yes.
And finally they came, which was awesome
It
to have
was.
them there and to dance for us in the nighttime by around a big fire. And how that medicine, I told people it worked thousands of years ago, and I said it'll work for everybody here today. And a lot of people, a couple of them that first time got healed with their problems in their body. And so it was a welcome home gathering for our people to have the bear dancers to come.
They came up from California, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
down to out of Ukiah.
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
and I got to go there, I think it's next weekend with them. And they always want me to come, and then they're going to go to Redding, and they want me over there too. And I appreciate them that they have brought their medicine back to the people, because it was awesome how it has helped people over the years. And I always thank God, what a simple gathering it was to be able to help people. And I pray that when they come again, that'll do the same thing.
So Tom, you're in a sense a voice for the Takelma people in your storytelling. did you work with Grandma Aggie in any of that?
I did. I was blessed when I started out storytelling to work with quite a number of elders, including Chuck Jackson at the Cow Creek and Edison Chilquin over at the Klamath and Caraway George and the Shasta and quite a few others, and of course Grandma Aggie. So we spent a lot of hours talking about the culture, talking about the stories, and of course working together to put the salmon ceremony back on both the Applegate and the Rogue Rivers.
Now, Grandma Aggie came to be a voice for the voiceless. And I think probably no one could explain that better than her. Mm-hmm. So let's see this video clip where she explains how she became the voice for the voiceless.
I was sitting on my deck after having lunch one day and had my water sitting in on the little table by me. My big dog, Sagap, was down on the floor by my foot. And I'm sitting there thinking, that, what does he mean, be a voice for the voiceless? And just then the wind came up and started rustling the leaves on the tree by my patio. I watched that. Oh, the air, the wind doesn't have a voice. Is that what you mean? And so I'm sitting there and pondering about it, and then I reached for my water glass. My eyes just went right to the water. You don't have a voice either. By this time, my eyes were running. And I said, oh, I'm beginning to understand. And my big dog, Sagap, stood up and put his head on my knee, and I'm patting his head, looking at him. You don't have a voice either. The animal. Oh, man, I was really crying then. And so I began to understand to be a voice for the voiceless. And so I let that to go on TVs and radios and stuff over there, and to have people to join me to be a voice for the voiceless.
You're watching a tribute to Agnes Baker Pilgrim, known fondly as Grandma Aggie. And as you've heard, she became the voice for the voiceless. It's something she apparently took very seriously. Mm-hmm. She also became part, actually as a founding member, of an organization called the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers.
International Council.
International Council, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, she was a founding member and traveled all over the world, every continent she has traveled with the 13 grandmothers. And it's a beautiful thing to have this group of women out there sharing their knowledge to the future generations. Thomas, you know they've traveled every continent, right? Is that true?
Yeah, they have been all over the world. I was thinking that I could never keep up with Aggie's travel schedule.
That is for sure.
One time she's in France, then she's in Bolivia. You know, it's just, it was amazing.
I remember in one of her talks, she said, my life is not easy. She said, basically, I have roller skates, even though you can't see them, because she says sometimes she works, 18 hours a day in that capacity. Well, one of the people that she got to meet in this endeavor is the Dalai Lama. Yeah. Let's see a video that shows some of that.
It feels like it's not a coincidence. It's like the Creator had chosen me to be on this path. And as we came together as grandmothers, I felt the same, that it's no coincidence that any of us came to this circle. If there's on the other side this great spirit that we're going to sit before sometime that is known by many names, I feel like being in the presence of His Holiness was that feeling of awesomeness, that feeling of peacefulness, that contented feeling just wilts, makes you just feel wilted. You're in the presence of somebody that walks his talk. And it's really great because I think that gives you kind of an idea what is going to be when we meet our Maker.
What a moving video. Tish, you had some comments about.
Yeah, thinking about the 13 indigenous grandmothers that toured the world and did so much fabulous work for the environment and for cultural awareness, I just was reminded of one of Grandma Aggie's favorite expressions, and she said it frequently, and every time she said it, it just opened up my heart, and that is, I'm everybody's grandma. I have heard her say that many times, and to me that represents, well, first, just a lovely thing to say to a big room full of people or to a forest full of trees, but I'm everybody's grandma is so inclusive, and that's just how I see Grandma Aggie's whole life and approach and attitude, that everyone was included in her heart. There was room for everyone, and I just think that's a message that's so important to be shared. And not just the humans, but the trees and the animals and the water, but she was everybody's grandma.
That's an important, Tom, you know a lot about that in terms of the point of view of, yes, there's people. There's also rock people, there's tree people, there's the swimmers.
Yes.
And I think when she's speaking of everybody's grandma, she's including all of those people because everyone is people. Yeah.
And there seems to be so much love that goes through, you know, and I think, you know, when I think of people's experience, certainly mine of grandmother, it's, grandmothers are not made to be as strict usually as your parents. They're not trying to mold you so much, they just pretty much embrace you. And that seems to be her way.
What really struck me was her humor. She had a wonderful sense of humor. And I remember once being up at the Siletz Indian Reservation. She and I were up there together teaching at their culture camp for the tribe. We were sitting in a big room and waiting for dinner. There's a long line of people lined up for dinner. And I sat down with Aggie thinking, I'm not going to stand in that line. I'm going to wait till it's done. The kitchen opened, and of course, this young woman brought out Aggie's dinner because you always serve the elders first. And I was saying to her, boy, you've got a good deal going here, you know. And before I practically had it out, there was another young woman came out and gave me my dinner, and Aggie just laughed, and she says, it's the gray hair, Tom, it's the gray hair. You know? But that kind of humor and insight and openness to everyone is something I will always cherish about her.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people do have their cherished experiences with her. When she passed, people came together
Yes.
and in some very powerful celebration of lives. There was one in Cave Junction and one in Grants Pass. Let's see a video clip that Channel 5 put together about the life celebration in Cave Junction.
A steward of the land, a beloved member of the community, a grandma to all. That's just a bit of how you might describe Agnes Baker Pilgrim.
We just consider ourselves so fortunate to have known her for 95 years.
On November 27th, Grandma Aggie's story came to a peaceful conclusion. In honor of all that she gave, friends of Grandma Aggie came together to celebrate her life.
Everybody loved her, and she reached out to all kinds of people, and she represented the best in people.
As the oldest living member of the Takelma people and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz, Grandma Aggie's life has enough stories to fill a book. However, friends describe advocacy for Native American culture and the environment as some of her most memorable work.
She often talked about reciprocity, and what she meant by that was that our place as humans is to give back to the earth.
But she also said, you know, human beings are not intruders, we're participants. And that's really important, especially in the world the way it is, to realize that we are participants in making this world a better place.
With traditional ceremonies and sharing of stories, the celebration of life marked just that, the celebration of one person who spent her life making a difference. Her friends say they hope to carry on her legacy and pass on the wisdom she bestowed to them.
And she was so inspired by what she felt the earth represented. And the earth was her church. She always admonished us to take care of the earth, particularly the water.
In Cave Junction, Miles Ruichi, NBC5 News.
So we have all had the experience, I believe most people certainly, in remembering someone who has passed away. And, you know, there's this kind of double-edged situation where there's the sadness, the sense of loss, but also remembering some of the wonderful things about the people. So these kind of celebrations probably have some laughter as well as tears. And I think it's great that people who have been touched by her were able to come together. And my guests here, Tish McFadden and Tom Doty, knew Grandma Aggie. I feel confident saying very well. You worked so closely with her. So what kind of experiences did you have when you learned of her passing and the getting together with other people who knew her?
Well, you know, it was so quick, her passing. It was a very, very short time from her hospitalization to her moving on. And of course, it was great shock that went through the entire world community who knew her. And we had actually a date to film again within days of that moment. But I was so touched. My friend Alice D. Maselli made a personal call to me right after her passing to let me know personally. I knew she'd been hospitalized, but I'll always thank Alice for that. And I just know that the people coming together at the Grants Pass celebration, there was just so much collective love in that room, collective sorrow, wonderful speeches. Even a children's classroom came in and sang a song about salmon. It was so lovely. I sang a song I wrote for her that's part of the Upriver to Morning project. Alice also sang, and Thomas performed a beautiful original poem about grandmothers. So it was interesting. The event actually went, they expected about a 2-hour event from 1 to 3. I believe it went about 5.5 hours, which is just a way to describe the amount of people who were moved to speak. And what I loved about the organizers, they didn't put a cap on it. Let people share what they need to share. Here we are on this day. And we did hire a filmmaker to capture the entire duration. And bless his heart, he said it was so moving to be a part of this event that he just was going to stay the duration. So that's to say that people came with collective joy and sorrow and left with very full hearts. I know I did.
Kind of sounded like no one wanted to leave.
The party that never ends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very special.
So, Tom, were you able to go to either of the Celebration of Life?
Yeah, I was at the Grants Pass Celebration of Life, and I shared a poem, and I was there the day before helping set it up and all of that. It was just amazing. I saw people there I hadn't seen in years. They just came from all over to celebrate Aggie's life.
So in part 2, we will see some of the report that Channel 5 made of the Grants Pass celebration.
Good.
And we'll also have you share your poem, Thomas, if you don't mind. Well, we're near the end of part 1, and I want to make sure I get the acknowledgments for people because I had a lot of help creating the video for this program and a lot of help from you guys just kind of getting a focus for this. So some of the people I want to acknowledge, Pete Bedell and Brian Horton, they're responsible for a lot of the video we saw, particularly with the President's Medal, and of course KBOI, Channel 5. Tish, I want to make sure that you get credit because a lot of those conversations were part of the Upriver to Morning.
Yes.
So very
Along the
glad.
River. Thank you.
So very glad to have access to that. I really appreciate that. The part that shows the Grandma Aggie with the Dalai Lama, that's part of a film called For the Next 7 Generations, and that's tied in with those International Council of 13 Grandmothers. I also want to make sure to acknowledge my crew. We would not have this show without all these talented and dedicated people that are here in the studio and in the control room. And I wanted to make sure that we did credit to the wonderful life and work of this incredible person. So I really do have a great deal of appreciation for everyone involved in making this happen. Even in both parts, there's no way to really encompass everything that Grandma Aggie was. But we're going to do another part of this show, and so we'll have people look for that. In the meantime, I just want to say thank you very much for watching this tribute to Grandma Aggie, and we'll be back with part 2 also on RVTV. I'm John Letz.
No way, no way, no, 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 oh, no, 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 oh, no, 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 hey, no, hey, no, hey, no, hey, away, 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 hey, no, hey, no, I know, hey, no, hey, no,